Guys, this is I Spy with the Animal Eye. Guys, this is the video where I am showing you how to do an animal eye, very highly texturized, focusing on layers and the direction in which we apply the oil pastels. So here we go. So this is the animal eye that I'm gonna do. I think it's a cat eye. I'm pretty sure it's a cat. I don't think it's a dog. But anyways, so we're gonna start off with using this as our start. I'm gonna trace. And then basically what I'm looking for is I'm looking to see how much of this eye gets covered. Remember from the last video, how much the top lid and how much the bottom lid covers the iris here. And so based on my picture, I'm gonna say by my reference points that the top gets covered about that much, the bottom gets covered about that much, and then you can see right here, that's when the iris really starts, you can really see that natural round curve of the iris here. We have this skin, dark skin here of the animal. I'm going to draw this in right here. And then this part really connects right to that skin. Goes right on down. And then this skin here follows all the way around and is about the same thickness here. It slightly tapers off and then gets thinner and thinner. So this line right here I can erase. So therefore I can really judge the thickness that I need. And then from the top lid here, this area just kind of continues over. And then this dark shadow here continues over here. So I'm just going to leave it like this, just to show myself that that's what's going on there. Now that I have the shape of my eye, and I've got the lines that I don't need anymore erased, now what I'm going to do is do my pupil and then do my light source. My pupil comes all the way down really close. I'm gonna say about here. Very large pupil. And then my light source is right here. Again, guys, this is just the contour line drawing. I'm not adding in anything else. I'm not putting in hair texture, even though it's an animal and it's got a ton of texture here. I'm not gonna put that in. I could, like this area, this color change here, I could put that in just to show myself. It's just like it's almost like a reminder that, hey, this is what's happening here. and I have to slightly adjust because the picture is a little more square than my paper, so I need to make sure that I adjust properly. But I'm not adding in any texture. I'm not adding in values or shadows. Keeping it fairly simple. So therefore, this is just my line drawing. Now moving on to tracing. All right, guys. So next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my rough draft and I'm going to trace it onto my final paper. Okay, my final paper is nice, thick, good quality paper. Rough draft paper is not. It's really, really thin. It's just newsprint paper. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trace it. A few things to think about when tracing. One, this paper doesn't fit on the tracing board, so you're gonna have to move it around, but when you move it around, you're gonna wanna make sure that you don't move your paper too much. You wanna keep your paper lined up as best as possible when moving. And then the other thing to think about too is, one, this drawing, the lines need to be dark enough to where you can see through it, but when you draw onto your final paper, your lines need to be as light as possible. So when you see me tracing, you're actually probably not going to see any lines on my paper from the video because I'm drawing so lightly, because we don't want our pencil lines to show through our oil pastels. So with that in mind, you need to take that in consideration. Guys, if you don't have a tracing board, that is totally okay. You do not need a tracing board. You can use a window. Back when I was a kid, that's what we used all the time when we needed to trace something. We just used a window with light shining through. You hold your papers up, you keep it lined up as best as possible, and you trace out your lines. Again, you do not need a tracing board. If you are motivated and inspired to do art, I would highly suggest to get a tracing board. I think this tracing board you can get at Walmart or Myers, even Amazon, probably for about $20. All right, guys, you probably can't see very well. I've got my lines traced on my final paper. So now what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be putting on my first layers of oil pastels. I'm gonna be working around the eye. I'm gonna be starting on the hair. So again, the order is my first layers, working on that hair, working on the lighter colors, and slowly layering on top of one another. I'm getting to my darker colors. And then from there, I'm gonna work out to in. I'm gonna then start adding in my skin and then move on to my iris and then placing in my pupil and trying to keep the black contained and controlled as best as possible. Guys, I encourage you to work this way because black can get out of hand very easily, and black will smear around your paper, and then next thing you know, you've got a bunch of smudges that you don't want. So just be careful with that, and layer, layer, layer. And the key component for the animal is direction, direction, direction. You see that the hair moves in this direction. So that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be putting my oil pastels in this direction, and then when I move up here, it starts changing in this direction. So when I'm actually coloring in my hair, I need to make sure that I'm coloring in the direction in which the hair moves. That is a key component. The other part is that we need to make sure that we're making the hair a realistic size. So this hair is about this long, and so that should be the length of stroke that I'm making with my oil pastels, so therefore it's as realistic as possible. these are the colors that I'm going to be using for my hair. I'm going to start off with the light hairs, then apply the medium, and then apply a little bit of the orange. Actually, probably go in this order. I'm going to test it first on just some white scrap piece of paper. Make sure that I like it. Sometimes oil pastels, the way that it looks in the pastel form versus on the paper looks a little different. This looks a little yellow on the paper, which there are some good tints of yellow in here, so I'm confident in it. Moving on to this one. Oh yeah, I like what I'm seeing, so I'm gonna go with this. First, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna color in a nice thick layer of this stuff. And really with this, I'm gonna cover the entire white area. I'm not gonna color in my eyeball or my skin area, but really wherever the hair is touching, I'm going to color in the whole thing, and then I am going to rub it in. Okay, but while I'm coloring, I'm going to make sure that I'm still going in the direction that the hair works. So the hair works this way and then starts moving this way. On this side, the hair definitely works this way off the eye, where this works up and then over. Okay, here we go. Okay, now that I'm done with my first layer, as you can see how the texture is running in the direction that the hair works. Now what I'm gonna do, and it's nice and thick, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my finger and I'm gonna rub and smooth out the oil pastels. And this is gonna cover a lot of that white paper that you can see. I'm gonna make sure that as I'm rubbing, I'm not changing the direction. I'm still consistent with the direction that I laid the oil pastel down on the paper. All right, now that I've got my first layer down, it's in the direction, it's rubbed, it's the lighter version, lighter layer. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start going through and I'm gonna look to see where some areas are lighter, where some areas have more of a orange tint, and then where some areas are darker. So I'm gonna worry about the areas that are lighter right now, and then shortly after that start applying the areas that are darker. Again, I am focused on the direction and the length of hair. Guys, right now I want to talk about how I'm applying the hair. I'm trying to be a little bit sporadic when it comes to my texture. I don't want it to be too consistent and too spaced out. If it's too consistent and evenly spaced out, it almost looks too mathematically perfect rather than spontaneous, almost like hair is. So you need to be very careful of that. Keep it spontaneous, keep it very random how that hair lays on top of each other, and you'll be good. Now it's time to smear, and as I apply more layers, my smearing I'm not going to push so aggressively because I don't want to lose a lot of my texture. I want to keep some of that in, so I'm not going to push as hard. Something that I want to share is you can see how the oil pastel is getting on my finger, and it's almost like rubbing off the top layer skin of my finger. And so if you're pushing too hard, sometimes that hurts. Sometimes your fingers just kind of go numb. I like to say, you know, pain is weakness leaving the body, and I just like to keep going with it. But there are some times when you're going to change from one color to the other, you're going to want to clean off your fingers. I like to use soap and water and then dry them off, but they need to be 100% dry before you start going back on to your project. Now that I've got my my lighter color along with a medium color, this one's fairly yellow, I'm gonna start placing in the orange and probably keep the orange. Maybe put a little bit of orange up here and really place the orange down here, and that'll probably be it with the orange. Alright guys, so now that I have my lighter and I got my orange, now I'm going to go back through and kind of bring down some of the brightness that I've got right now between the yellow and orange. I'm going to go back through and I'm going to put on just a lighter, this is called brown olive, or actually olive brown, and it's going to kind of just dull down the brightness of it. I don't want to put it on too heavy, just a nice light layer, and then just lightly smear that in as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding in with a darker brown. It looks black. It's called sepia. It's a very dark brown. I'm going to start going over that, and then probably just place in my darker hairs, my darker areas, and then after that I'm going to then apply my skin in with this. Something that's really, really important to think about the skin. These areas where the light is reflecting off of the skin, those are critical areas that help bring out some of that dimension, like the glassy look in the eye. These light reflections are key components of really making your eye pop. So you really got to catch those areas. with this, I'm not necessarily like coloring it in. I'm really focusing almost on every individual hair. So therefore, the darker colors don't take over the entire area. I just want it to look more like they're individual hairs and that they're mixing and blending in with the rest of the hairs that I have. So therefore, again, so it doesn't take over. And then very, very lightly, I'm going to take my finger and just barely smear with any pressure. So therefore, they don't take too much attention away from the rest of the texture that's going on. There comes a point in time where you don't really have to smear. There might be some areas that I might go through and kind of blend in just a little bit, but I'm starting to get the layered effect of where you can actually see like individual hairs. And so sometimes you don't want to smear like that top darker layer because it literally looks like hair is starting to overlap hair. Now I'm going to go in with my black. And I've got some areas that should be darker in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and pull those out. And right here, I've got a blend from really, really dark to a little bit of lighter area, or dark to a lighter area. And basically what I'm gonna do is just like we do with Gradual Valley Change with colored pencil. One, I'm putting less of the black in by controlling the pressure in which I'm pushing with, and then also the amount of oil pastel that I'm actually putting in. All right, I'm at the spot to where I filled in my darker areas with the fur. I'm not done with the fur yet. It looks layered. I got some more blending to do over here, but I'm gonna start now in here. Go ahead, do my leather. And then once I'm done with the skin, leathery part, then move on to the iris and the pupil, and then I will place in just my finishing touches after the fact. Something to think about, since the skin leather is so dark and it really doesn't have much of a directional texture. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in as like little circles. So therefore it really gets into the paper. And then I'm actually going to, when I smear, I'm also gonna smear it with my finger as little circles. All right, so now that I'm partially done with the skin, now I'm gonna go ahead and move on to my iris and pupil. The only thing that I'm not done with the skin are the highlights, and I'm gonna save those till the end because I might have some recovery to do. Some of this black and some of this dark brown might get into my colored iris, and so I might need to clean that up a little bit. So I'm gonna wait on those highlights, and also I need to work on the edging from the fur to the skin. Like this is too nice of a hard edge versus what's actually happening there. So those things I'm gonna finish the project by putting in some of those nice details, but I'll do that at the very end. Moving on to the iris. Okay, for the iris, I'm gonna do the exact same concept that I did with my fur. I am going to layer it. My iris it's got a cool yellow and then it's got a cool green. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a base layer, blend it, and then go back in with a brighter yellow, and then go back in with a brighter green, and then blend it inward, my green in, or actually, sorry, blend my yellow in, and then blend my green out. It's the same idea, starting with layers. Also the direction. There's a lot of texture inside the iris, and the texture appears to move out and in, and so that is the direction that I'm going to be coloring in. You just heard me talk about coloring in a direction, and you see that I'm not coloring in that direction. I'm coloring in my borders. It's that old technique that your kindergarten teacher or first grade teacher taught you, to stay inside the lines. I'm coloring around my edges and my borders, and then I'm going to color in the direction, so therefore I keep my color contained within the space. One thing that I do is once I have my color on the edge, I make sure that I'm pulling in. I've got my finger on the edge, so therefore I'm not pulling in any of that black. I'm being very careful and cautious of that. I'm making sure that I've got my finger on the very edge, and I'm then pulling in. With the pupil, guys, you want to put in just a bunch of black. You want the black to be like pitch black. It's going to give a lot of contrast to your piece. So I put in the black nice and thick. And then I'm super careful with my edging. I'm trying to contain the black as best as possible, so therefore it's nice and clean. that's really the edge that is super nice and clean on the actual eye itself. Okay, everything else I got to go back through and kind of break up how clean my edges are. I'll show you how to do that. But for the pupil though, it's super important that you get that nice and clean and you get it super thick. Now I'm going to go back through and I'm going to clean up my light source with white. I'm going to put a bunch of white in it, and as you can see, there's a little bit of blending that's going on and also some shadows that are happening there and almost like a tint of blue that's in there. So I'm going to add that real quick. All right, so now that I have a lot of my fur done, I've got my iris done and I've got my black in and it's looking good. But now what I need to do is work on the lines. So these lines here are a little too crisp, a little too perfect. If we take a look at the actual picture of the eye, we can see the connections between the skin and the fur, how they kind of blend and work together, how you can see the hair is actually coming off from the skin, and so we need to create that illusion. And then also create some of these freestanding hairs that are stragglers. They're kind of individually hanging off on their own. And then also, last but not least, bring out some of these less defining highlights. So here we go. Alright guys, so this is what I've got going on. Went back in, like I said, I added in some of those darker hairs, those lighter individual hairs that are coming through. Added in my black shadow as the top lid kind of hovers over that iris. There's a nice shadow that lays there. Also went through and added in my highlighted areas. and smoothed out some of those harsher lines. Blended it to make it look like the hair and the skin are kind of working within each other. Guys, this is the final, this is what I'm looking for. This is how you get there. Layer, 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 layer. Direction, direction, direction. Guys, you got this. Work hard. I know you can do this. Have fun with this, and just do your best. Do your best, guys. And guys, that's the project for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Just remember, layer, 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 direction, direction, direction. And as long as you follow those rules and layer appropriately, you're gonna do great. Guys, have fun with this and good luck.